Welcome to the Bold Money Revolution podcast. This is your source for straight talking, no fluff, business and high performance conversations that add real depth and value to the way bold leaders live, work, and thrive. I'm your host, Tara Newman. I'm here to show you how to optimize your performance as a leader so that you can grow a business that is profit-rich, efficient, and allows you to generate real, tangible wealth for yourself and others. We are here to help you lead with your values, to perform without overwhelm and burnout, and to do your most important work in the world. Hey, it's Tara, and I wanted to come in here and personally invite you to hop on a call with me, a free consultation call, where we can decide if the Bold Profit Academy is the right program for you right now. Here's one of the ways that you'll know that you need to hop on a call with me. We are focused on implementation. So if you're not getting things done in your business or you're not focused on the right tasks, you're not maximizing your time, then you are going to want to join the Bold Profit Academy because our core focus is implementation. And we do that through giving you guides and worksheets and calculators and frameworks that you can use in your business. We just run through our offer creation curriculum, and we had a participant go through it, and she created a highly leveraged offer at a premium price. But the way we created the resources for her to do that allowed her to take everything that she put together and then write her sales page with ease. That is called implementation, and that is called efficiency, because we want you to have more profit while working less hours and using the simplest, most effective strategies to do that. So if this sounds like something that you desire, that you're struggling with and you need support with, I want you to book your call with me over at theboldleadershiprevolution.com/academy so I can help you decide if this is the right time for you to join us. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Bold Money Revolution podcast. I'm here today with my dearest of dear friends, Jacquette Timmons. She's been on the podcast before. Jacquette and I were going back and forth, I think, in Instagram the other week, and we were just acknowledging and appreciating the levels of conversations that we have. You know, we talk about things that maybe other people aren't talking about, or we think about things a little differently. I think that we appreciate the fact that we're different. Right? The obvious, Jacquette's a lovely Black woman. I'm a lovely white woman. And I so value Jacquette's expertise and her perspective and her lens and how she intersects with money and the things that she sees. And I feel, Jacquette, that you respect the same from me.
Totally. 1,000%. I love it.
Yeah. And I think that we intentionally seek each other out for the lens that we have.
Yeah, it's almost like I'll speak for myself. It's like I have this thought, and then it's like, is there a safe space to like introduce this? To introduce that I have this thought, like to share and see, like, are you seeing the same thing? Or even if you're not, what do you think about what I'm seeing? So you just provide a safe space for me. So I want to just thank you for that.
Oh, and same for me. Thank you. So I love to shoot Jacquette like things I see on Instagram, and I'm like, "What's your hot take on this? Like, give me your hot take." And sometimes they're the same, and sometimes they're a little different. And we always are like, I think we're pretty aligned in how we think about things.
Yes.
So our goal here today is just to have one of our Jacquette and Tara open conversations about money, because that is really our expertises both lie in the realm of money. Mm-hmm. And what I said to Jacquette, I said, what do you want to talk about? And we're talking about this beforehand. And I said, I want to talk about things that we're not talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reason why you might not be talking about this and you might not be seeing this, and I think the reason why I feel Jacquette and I have a different take on this is because you have clients that aren't in the online space, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I have clients who are not in the online space. I have clients that run businesses that don't use social media. They don't even have functioning websites. None of that really. And the majority of my career was not spent, in this space. I think same as for you, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Yeah. And I think that you and I also have traveled some pretty traditional career paths.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start your business?
I started it in 1995. And that was after working with one firm, Bankers Trust, now Deutsche Bank, for just a month shy of 10 years. And then even when I started my own business, it was to do the exact same thing that I had been doing there in the private bank, which was managing money for high net worth individuals and smaller foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't come into the quote unquote online world, quite frankly, until probably 2012.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impetus for starting your own business?
A couple of things. One, the president of the private bank had been fired. And, in hindsight, I feel like it was to no fault of his own. It was, from a firm-wide perspective, for folks that don't know the history, Bankers Trust was in a little bit of a scandal. And this had to do with derivatives in Orange County. And some of that, trickled down and had an impact on the private bank, even though none of us were involved in that at all. But with a whole new, influx of professional folks at the realm, our guy, who was actually the one who was spearheading making some tweaks to the private bank, because prior to him coming, it was really a traditional private bank. Like, we did not talk to families or individuals that were not in the $2 or $3 million asset level. And he came in having come from Fidelity and was introducing more of what we would refer to as a retail platform, because he's like, what about those folks that only have a couple of $100,000, but they may be a part of a family, or they may be an entrepreneur, and you want to get them when they're at the $100,000 mark so that you can grow with them? So that's a long way of answering, but it's an important answer, because when he left, everything was all kind of shaken up. And I was thinking about, what am I going to do next? And they were making some changes. And I thought about staying at Bankers Trust, interviewed internally, looked elsewhere. And then one of the people on the team said, why don't you start your own business? And I was like, I can't do that. And they're like, you started one inside the private bank. Why can't you do that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did, didn't I? So I started my business initially to do exactly what I had been doing there, but on my own. And that was working with people that had $100,000 for investable assets or smaller foundations. And yeah, that's why I started it and when I started it.
What was the draw for you to work for yourself? What kind of was exciting for you about that, or interesting?
I think my answer in hindsight would probably be different in terms of my answer in the moment at the time, right? Because I think in the moment, quite frankly, it was a lot of ego, if I'm being completely honest. Like, to just—
I love that. I can do this.
Yeah, like once somebody planted the seed, it's like, oh, I can do this and I want to be a money manager. But I think now, with clearly the benefit of a lot of time, I think one of the reasons why I've stayed with it, and clearly my business looks very different today than it did back then, but I also feel like I always looked at the way people approach money very differently. And I felt like when you are in an institution, you have to approach it their way, and you have to have conversations the way that they want to have conversations. So as an example, I would really get frustrated when we would have, performance evaluation reviews. And when I say performance, portfolio performance conversations with our clients. And it was always just about the return number. And it's like, first of all, it's going to fluctuate. It's going to be up one quarter and down the next quarter. But let's talk about why. And let's talk about how you were feeling about that. And let's talk about some of the more proactive strategic decisions that you need to make, as opposed to, oh my God, my portfolio is down. What are we going to do? We're not going to do anything, because it's a part of our longer vision. But that's not always necessarily, at least back then. And I don't want to say encouraged, but there was too much focus just on the numbers and not a broader conversation around people's behavior, choices, and their emotions around it.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I've done a lot of work with business owners on their financial statements and presenting them to banks for various reasons, or for sale or something like that. And I always say, facts tell, stories sell. right?
Yep.
That there's other things at play that are happening that aren't necessarily represented in the numbers. There's matter of fact, a whole story that's happening that's not, in the numbers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Well, ego drove you. I actually love that about you.
Just being honest. Oh my God.
That's great. And I love that you worked with Millionaires, because we were actually while we were talking through what we want to talk about and some of the things that, aren't being said, you and I both feel very strongly around some of this messaging that we're seeing in the online business space around 7 figures.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, people don't actually say 7 figures outside of the online business space. Like, I don't hear that being used. Like, my clients aren't like, I have a 7-figure business. Do you hear that? Is it
Not
me?
at all. Not at all. No.
See, this is why I talk to Jacquette. I'm like, can you just fact check me here? Because
No.
I'm like, this isn't like a thing.
And I think, as I was sharing before we pressed record, sometimes I question my reaction, because I know some of it is a style issue from the standpoint of, I know a lot of millionaires. I mean, I guess everybody could say, well, what's a lot? I can count on 2 hands, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not an exaggeration. And I know 2 billionaires, and none of them lead with that, right? They're very quiet. It's very, I'm going to just stay with the word quiet. Like they just don't wear it on their sleeve. They don't say, I have $1 million business. They don't say, I have a yacht. They don't say, I have a plane. I've never been on the one friend's plane, but they'll say, hey, do you want to come and go out on the water? But they're not going to say, do you want to go out on my yacht? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a part of the conversation. And just because they're not doing that doesn't mean that they're not talking about money. Because I think sometimes the conflation with what I hear in some of the discussions around build a 7-figure business is that people aren't talking about money. Well, first of all, I've long believed that that's wrong. I think people talk about money all the time. I just don't think they're having the right conversations. And I also feel like just because they're not being explicit about what they're doing doesn't mean that they're not talking about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. My favorite book is The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
And like, when I look at the millionaires that I know, they are the most unassuming people. And so I think there's a lot to unpack here. And I want to stay here because I'm really concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just genuinely concerned for business owners. I'm concerned with specifically for online people who are seeking information online, because there's a lot that's not true. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, and this is not my mindset. This is years of knowledge and experience and continued learning and education. There are academics at this point studying what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. And I just was reading a study called The Entrepreneur, because we have flooded the system with quote unquote entrepreneurs. We've actually broken the intention of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And that's, going to have impact on the economy. Mm-hmm. And not just the economy, but, I'm really concerned with the impact that it's having on people's social and emotional health and their mental health, chasing these goals. And there's one thing in the 2018 Amex Women's Small Business Report, and granted, this is a few years old, but 88% of women were not making over $100,000 in revenue in their business. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, when they did the 2019 survey, I don't think they did a side-by-side comparison of that. So I don't know what the number is now. What we do know is more and more women are entering the small business space. And when you start to dissect this by race, you know that this is horrific.
Yeah.
Right? It's bad. And I don't have those exact numbers on me, but I will just be honest and fair and say that that's not great. So if 88% of women small business owners are making less than $100,000 a year, why do we have marketing around seven-figure businesses, Jacquette?
I think we have marketing around that because it gives the people that are not making that $100,000 something that they can hold on to and that they can say, yeah, that's my goal. But it takes away, I think, some of the critical thinking that's required of what it will take to actually do that in a sustainable way. And the parallel that I draw there is the conversation that is often had when it comes to venture capital and how, there's this push for raise capital, raise capital. Like I sit on the cabinet in New York City. I sit on the cabinet for advancing Black entrepreneurship in New York City. And I don't mind saying it here on a recorded podcast. One of the things that I always say when we have our meetings is we can't just focus on incubators and providing people access to venture capital because not every business is designed to need venture capital. Like, what about that neighborhood business that needs, tools and access to financing that's going to help them, but they're never going to benefit from venture capital because they're not designed to scale and be sold in a scalable fashion. So why to the seven-figure, it's seductive at the end of the day, right? It's like, oh my God, yeah, that sounds fantastic. But I think missing in the conversation is the nuances around what it takes to actually do that. And like I said, in a sustainable way.
Yeah, some of my messaging around the Bold Profit Academy is around this number of 250,000. And the reason why I have 250,000 as a number is a little bit based on profit first. And when you look at how that $250,000 would get distributed, it allows somebody to take home six figures of pay. So they would take home $125,000 a year in CEO pay. They would have some profit that they could take out of that business to do whatever they want with it. Profit first is pretty big on rewarding you, the business owner. So I would like to see women invest do some investing or invest in their families or whatever. Personally, my retirement contributions and my stock money comes out of my pay. But if it didn't, it could come out of your profit. And then you have some nice money for expenses to run your business and to hire some support. And it's a very manageable thing. And I get questioned a lot about, is this your limited mindset, Tara? Is this your limiting belief?
Wow. Really?
Yeah. And it's been by men. Men have questioned this. It's two men have questioned me on this. So the women in the Bold Profit Academy are like, yes, like this is where we need to be right now.
Right.
But it's first of all, I like to challenge the personal development industry. So my response to this was, what if believing in limiting beliefs is really what's limiting you?
Yeah, it's so funny.
Because I feel like there's some truth to that.
Oh my God. Well, I always remind people when they talk about mindset, I'm like, my definition of mindset is perspective, A, and then B, it always has to accompany action. Like you can't think your way through to the other side of something.
Right.
So even if it were a quote unquote limiting mindset, you can't think your way through from 250 to a million. You got to do something.
Right. But here's what I actually see happening is that this $1 million number for women becomes a real distraction where they're focusing so much on that $1 million or what might get them to $1 million, they completely miss what will get them to 100,000 or 200,000 or 250,000. And then when we can get women anywhere between 100,000 and 250,000, it depends. It depends on where you're living. It depends on your partner. It depends on, right? It depends on so many factors. What is the right number for you? But 250,000 is a good chunk, in my opinion. But when we get you there, and you start to realize, and you have a system for your money, and you start to realize that you have enough, something happens where you calm down. And then you can go for more than enough, and whatever more than enough looks like to you. But what is happening, and I'd love your input on this, but what I think is happening is that in the online space, the marketers, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the marketers are selling you self-actualization.
Right.
When you need basic needs, safety, security, emotional support, and things like that.
Right.
And so they're jumping you all the way up the pyramid without having those foundational pieces in place. And it's devastating.
It is. And here's something else, right? So obviously, for a variety of reasons, I will omit a lot of details, but I've got a client who does indeed have a 7-figure business, but she doesn't pay herself as much as she could. She does work that she probably shouldn't, because she's got team members that are not really stepping up to the plate. And so she's picking up the slack because stuff's got to get done. Like, there's just so many different things. So I guess in sharing that example, what I'm trying to point out is you can have the holy grail of a 7-figure business, and that's fantastic. But does that mean that you've worked out and worked on your relationship with money and your relationship with managing other people to the degree that 7 figures is not killing, and maybe that's just a wrong choice of word.
No, that's a pretty good choice of word. That's a pretty good choice of word. Yeah. So a couple of things. So when my clients are not in the online business space, they're primarily over $1 million, up to a $60 million business. And my dad has had his own business, and I've had family members who've had their own business. My husband has his own business. The hardest revenue amount in a business, in my opinion, is 1 to 5 million.
Why do you
that's
say
like
that?
That's a tight spot, because you start requiring more team.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to manage the people, the cost of the people. It's not like the most efficient sweet spot of a business. And it can be a real drain, and it can be really hard for people. And yes, just because you have revenue of that amount doesn't mean that you're profitable, because I've seen that as well. So, it's no joke when Mike Michalowicz talks about in the book that 83% of business owners are living paycheck to paycheck. My husband's worked in businesses where they were so fast outspending their cash because of the wife's $30,000 Bloomingdale credit card, and the whole family had to have Mercedes, and they had nothing left to run the business with.
Right. Yeah.
Because a lot of small business owners just aren't knowledgeable about money, and they use their business like it's a piggy bank.
Exactly, which is so crazy. I always remind folks, that thing you just got paid for, all that money ain't yours.
So my dad used to say to me, he's like, oh, what does it matter? It goes from one pocket to the other. And he would point to the pockets in his jeans, like one pocket is a business pocket and the other pocket is a personal pocket. And I'm like,
yeah, but something happens between that, Dad. It goes in one pocket as another number, and it goes into the other pocket as another number.
Well, it's funny because he's actually really good with finances. So I think like a part of him was being like facetious about it, but I can see how people think that. But then the other thing that always fascinates me that's missing from the marketing messages are what happens when you hit $1 million. Like, I get that, like, in the online space, we get like gold balloons and like macaroons and all that jazz. And anybody who is celebrating making money in the online business space, I am not pooing on you. Like, you do you. I'm not gonna, I'm so glad that you're succeeding. Truly, I truly am.
Yes.
And I've got friends who have online businesses and they are making $1 million more and they do talk about it online. And like, I celebrate them. I'm like, you're amazing. Awesome. Right. But what happens is you have to do it again.
Right.
Next year.
Right. Right. So it's the whole issue of sustainability.
Right. So now we're getting into sustainability. So whatever you just did, you now need to do again and again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think for me, part of some of my challenge that I bump up against in terms of what I hear is the idea that there's only one way to do it. And we know because of some of the clients that we have that there are so many different ways to have $1 million business. But I don't think that in the online space, when it's being marketed, that nuance is being really highlighted. It's almost as if this is the way as opposed to this is a way.
Yeah. And then I think women really look at that and they go like, what am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not perfect enough. Like, how much harder do I need to work to get to that benchmark, which is for me why I'm like, you're so overworking because you have a goal that is so far beyond where you are right now. Can we just bring the goal back a little bit and do what's required to get to this benchmark and then decide if you want to do this again, if this is sustainable, if this feels good, if this is what's required.
Yeah, I forgot where I was. I was having a conversation with someone and I was saying how, I will never tell someone that their dream is too big, but I will challenge them on the timeline. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think what you're pointing out is the timeline issue. So you want to have $1 million business. Are you clear within what time frame? Is that 5 years? Is that 10 years? Because the things that you will do to have a $1 million business that has a 10-year timeline to it is very different than what you would do if it's 5 years, and extremely different if you're trying to do it within 1 year. And I think that's another nuance that's not a part of the marketing of build a 7-figure business is within what timeline, because the choices and the trade-offs that you make depending upon the timeline are very, very different. And like you said, you might decide after you do it 1 year, like, oh crap, I didn't like those trade-offs.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that the speed in which people are thinking that these things come to fruition, there's a lot, and this goes well beyond the online space, by the way. Like there's a lot of knots and things have you seen the market?
I didn't check today before we got on the phone.
But just in general.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk about, we can talk about any of this stuff. WeWork, right?
Oh my God. Yes.
That market cap was way out of what they actually were. They weren't making any money at all. They had investors coming in. So even in the non-online space, this stuff is happening and it's not real.
Oh my God. WeWork is a great example. The tech bubble in the early 2000s, late 1990s is also a really great example when you see all of these firms getting financed and they don't have a pathway to revenue. And you're like, are you kidding me? You don't have a pathway to revenue. You haven't generated any revenue. And you've got X million dollars of financing. That's just ridiculous. And the WeWork thing, I'm just amazed at how quickly that imploded.
I'm amazed that it got off the ground at all. I was watching the documentary and I'm like, I'm just genuinely confused as to how anybody thought that this was anything of that magnitude. But really,
here's where they went wrong, I think, is they went wrong in thinking that the real estate market wouldn't say, whoa, wait a second. Right?
They had people thinking they were a tech company.
Yes.
Their investors thought they were a tech company. I'm like,
that's a real estate.
We're not in real estate. We're in tech. I'm like, no. I'm looking at a duck. It's a duck. It's not a dog. The duck doesn't start to bark. Right. I'm so genuinely confused.
Yeah.
How anybody bought that.
And so the fact that they thought that they didn't think, or presumably didn't think, that the real estate market wouldn't say, wait a second, we could do the same thing and cut you out and not have to do this. Why are we, giving you perhaps a discount on the square footage so that you can build this out and charge companies to come in. Why don't we just work directly with the companies?
You missed it. Their secret sauce was this existential life essence or whatever that they were consciousness that they were selling.
Yeah, I know.
That was
they did want this whole we live thing too, right? Like grown-ups as dorm. Like, that's ridiculous.
Like, this is very strange. This got very strange very fast. But I think like my point here is I know that so many women feel like, again, they're not doing it wrong. They don't know anything about, they might not have gone to business school. They, this is hard because of this. Like, or their business isn't where they want it to be, and they feel shame and embarrassment around that. Listen, if the guy from WeWork doesn't have shame and embarrassment, you shouldn't either.
Exactly.
It's good. It's good. You're good.
That is so true. So true.
I mean, that he is shameless.
Totally.
So, I mean, listen, I think that we can safely run businesses and I don't think it's about the money. I know, Jacquette, you and I were also talking about this, that I'm watching a lot of people put money over their mental and emotional and physical health. Mm-hmm. And that is terrifying for me because this is a long haul. You've been at this since 1995.
Yep.
That requires a serious level of endurance and resiliency.
Exactly. And lots of ups and downs for sure. Definitely.
And every year you have to do it over again.
Yep.
The financials reset. The sales reset. We go back to zero and we got to start building it all over again.
That's so true. That is so true. And I think that's a piece that gets lost in the conversation as well. The longevity piece just is not acknowledged, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you and I were also talking about, like, it's okay to go get a job.
Yeah, if you need to. And
right? Like, if you need money, like the one thing that drives me to a point of panic like no other is when people hire me because they need money now. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like a job? Can we try a job? You need money now?
There's no shame in that at all. And in fact, you would actually probably be better off for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is actually relieving some financial pressure. But depending upon the job, you might even actually learn a couple of things that you can then apply to your business when you decide to resume that. But if you think about it just from an energetic standpoint, because you have relieved some of the financial pressure, you will be able to think more clearly, which means you will be able to make better decisions because you're not making decisions from a tensed body that is just riddled with fear. You've got some breathing room and you just have clarity. And when you have, breathing room and clarity, the quality of your decisions are just naturally going to be better.
Yeah, I think, speaking from experience, my husband and I, our first business went, we closed and we went bankrupt because of it. Mm-hmm. And while we were transitioning, like closing the business, but hadn't quite moved on yet, he just basically threw on his tool belt and started doing handyman jobs, like odd jobs in people's homes just to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And really do some like emotional healing around the fact that we had just spent 5 years in the worst financial shape of our lives, wondering if we were ever going to be able to pay the mortgage. And I say this and it was dire. And at the same time, I'm going to acknowledge how much privilege I had in my bankruptcy story, because there are people who can't even afford bankruptcy.
Right.
Because you have to pay to go bankrupt.
Right. Yeah.
And I did have a support system around me. And, my mom did make sure that her grandkids had formula and diapers.
Right.
So there was a lot of privilege in that. And it was also really scary. And it was really hard. And then after he got done with the tool belt, because he was like, well, maybe I'll just do this. Maybe I'll just, do odd jobs. And he did that for like 18 months. And he's like, this is hard. This is like not great going into people's homes. And he didn't like it. So he's like, I'm going to go get a job. And he went and he got a job and he worked in a job. And I had a job for years while we rebuilt financially. And then it wasn't until almost 5 years after that I started my business. And then he took over his dad's business. So now he just bought and is running his dad's business all these years later. So it's okay. I don't know what else to say. Like my rock bottom was when we started to get like and it's so funny. It was so traumatic. My husband doesn't even remember this. And if he's listening to this, he's like, that didn't happen. But I swear it did. We started getting those letters from the bank that we missed mortgage payments.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, by the way, if you're going to do this again, we're going to move to foreclosure. And like the world, like, by the way, it takes a really long time to foreclose on a house. So this was not imminent danger,
right?
But it's still scary.
Right.
Like when you think about whenever you open something from like the town or the IRS, like we all panic, right? Like that was my big scary moment. And I was like, this is my rock bottom. I'm not moving in with my mother. I love her, but no, I'm not moving in with my children and my husband to go live with my mom. And this is my rock bottom. So we need to close this business and move on. Right. And I think having a rock bottom is important, like knowing what that line is.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. And, I also think that with the whole notion of giving oneself permission to be fluid with how they work is really tied to our employment trends. So I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but I think right now the average person stays with one employer for 4.4 years. Sometimes that's by their choice. Sometimes it's by the employer choice. And so I think people need to embrace that there are times in their career where they may be in-house. And for those of us that don't ever see ourselves being in-house again, we need those people in-house because you're the ones that hire us. Mm-hmm. For those of us that work with corporations. But my point with this is I think that sometimes, and I get it, our identity can be so tied to a label that we forget that sometimes the best thing to do is to do something that's not associated with that label. So to amplify your point, yes, you may want to be an entrepreneur, right? Maybe your ego, like mine was in the beginning, is tied to that. But if circumstances are such that you need to get a job, let that be okay. And let that not be a sign of failure.
Yeah, I was listening to this. It was actually a YouTube show. The YouTuber's name is CoffeeZilla, and he was talking. He was interviewing an academic who's doing research on entrepreneurship, fake entrepreneurship, and he said that, and this isn't just in the online space. This is just in the world, like everywhere. That people would rather, they're so attached to the title of entrepreneur that they rather tell their parents they're an entrepreneur than go and get a job as a barista and say they're a barista when they would make more money as a barista than they would as an entrepreneur. Yeah. I'm sensitive to time, so I want to start to shake us out of here. But I do have one final question that I would love to get your hot take on. I know what it is, but I really just want everybody else to have your hot take on it. You don't need to have $1 million business to be a millionaire.
You don't.
As a matter of fact, I've run the numbers. You can have a $250,000 business and I can get you to $1 million and be a millionaire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what you do with it, right? It's how you invest it. That millions can show up in other ways. So, I think of my business and my current model, there's just no way it would be $1 million. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, my 6 figures that I make. But if I were to create some sort of fintech, that could be $1 million, and that could be a way of doing that. Or in New York City, invest in some real estate. That could be a way of getting to $1 million as well. So there's more than one way to skin the $1 million cat.
Yeah. Listen, if you get into fintech, let me know.
Yeah.
Right. I'll kick you. I'll be an angel investor on that for you,
Oh my
Jacquette.
God. We should definitely talk a little bit more about that, because I have an idea for something that I have not seen out there yet. And I think it could be pretty interesting if I could just figure out how to make it work. That's where I get stuck.
I adore you.
I adore you too. And if I can just say one more thing.
Yeah.
Working. When I got my book deal, I got an advance, but I did not get a big enough advance to be able to just chill and work on my book. So I went and got a part-time job. And so I would work my part-time job and I would work with my clients and I wrote my book, and I did not see anybody for damn near a year.
You know what? There is, when you have enough, whether it is through knowing what your numbers are and knowing what you really need and having an appropriate goal, or getting a job, part-time or otherwise, and you have enough, there is something very calming about being able to meet your needs and then seeing a path to more.
Yep.
Instead of shooting for more before you have enough. Yeah. All right. What do you want to leave us with?
Oh my goodness. What do I want to leave us with? I know we covered a lot. And I think the thing that I want to leave people with is to remind them to check in with themselves. Like, do a gut check when you're making decisions. And you can't avoid the outside noise, but do a gut check around what you internalize of that outside noise. How about you? What do you want to leave people with?
I've been really thinking. I'm a deep thinker. I've been thinking a lot about just being human. Like, I see messages and I'm messaging and I'm like, oh, I'm a hot mess. I'm like, you're not a hot mess. You're a human being. You're human. You're a human, flesh and blood, emotions, all the things, right? Like, you're not a content mill. You're not just there to crank out work and for money's sake, for more money's sake. You're not a machine. You're a human being. Be human.
I love that.
So, Jacquette, you mentioned your book. Can you tell them about your book and where to find it?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So it's Financial Intimacy, how to create a healthy relationship with your money and your mate. And I explore the intersections of love and money, but looking at it with a social critics lens in terms of how things have changed, at least at that time, over the last 40 years, politically, economically, socially, and in terms of family dynamics. And so you can get it wherever you get books.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And where can they find you? You have a podcast?
I have a podcast, More Than Money, and they can find me on my website, JacquetteTimmons.com. And as Tara knows, I do love me some Instagram. So they can find me over there as well.
Awesome. I'm going to take the clip of you laughing out of this and just have it on repeat because I adore your laugh.
Thank you.
Thanks for stopping by, Jacquette.
God. Oh, this has been my absolute delight. I love our chats, and I'm glad that we had it with the world this time.
Same. If you found this podcast valuable, help us develop more bold leaders in the world by sharing this episode with your friends, colleagues, and other bold leaders. Also, if you haven't done so already, please leave a review. I consider reviews like podcast currency, and it's the one thing you can do to help us out here at the Bold Leadership Revolution HQ. We would be so grateful for it. Special thanks goes to Stacey Harris from Uncommonly More, who is the producer and editor of this podcast. Go check them out for all your digital marketing and content creation needs. Be sure to tune into the next episode to help you embrace your ambition and leave the grind behind.